So in today's lesson, we're going to be discussing permutations and combinations. And this method is to figure out how many possible outcomes there can be given a situation. So for example, if you buy a lottery ticket, if you bet on a horse race, or any type of race for that matter, how many different possible scenarios can we get for people who run for president, vice president, and secretary and treasurer? And a good example of that is if you go to Sonic and you look at all the different types of sodas they have to offer, and then how many different add-in flavors that they have. You can create so many different types of drinks. And so we're going to work on a formula, or in this case actually a method in the calculator, that will help us to determine how many different variations we can have. So we're going to start off with something simple. And this first one is called a combination, and here I wrote out the scenario of what it would look like. It has a little n, a big C, and a little r. And that little n, it represents the total number of objects. Total number of objects in a set. Total number of people, total number of horses, anything like that. And then the r value, it represents the number you choose for the group. In other words, how many winners can there be? How many different positions are you trying to fill? So the first thing we're looking at is we've got 5 students from a class that are going to run a race, and the top 3 students get to run in the track meet. So how many combinations of winners are there? Well, I'm first going to identify the students, and so names are too long, so I'm just going to name them student A, B, C, D, and E. So these are our students. And then and there's 5 of them, okay? Now I'm going to group them in groups of 3. So I'm going to start off with A, B, and C. That's one group. Then I'm going to go B, C, and D. That's another group. And then C, D, and E. That's another group. Well, I haven't grouped A with D and E, so I would need to do that. But I could also group A with C and D first, and leave out B. That's a new group. Then I could go A, D, E. Then I can go with B and group them with C and E, B, C, E, and keep going and going and going. And if you can see, that is quite a tedious task, and it's very hard to stay organized. Well, to keep from doing all of that, there's a little shortcut we can take. And what we need to do is use our graphing calculator. So in your calculator, you need to make sure you know where the math button is, right down here below the alpha key. I'm going to hit the math button. It gives me a list of options, but I don't want that list. I want to go over here to PRB, where it's probability. And under probability, we're looking at number 3, where you see the NCR, and that one is our combinations. If I choose 3 and hit enter, this is what it looks like on my screen. Now, if you did that with your calculator and that wasn't there, instead where the N is, there was an empty box, and the same thing with the R, then you will be able to use your cursor to move and type in the numbers that you need into those spots. If yours is like mine, you'll have to set yours up just a little bit differently. So that's what I'm going to do next. First of all, we're going to write down the keys that we used. We used the math button, and I always put a box around a button. Then we're going to arrow across to PRB for probability. And then you're going to choose number 3, which is lowercase n, uppercase C, lowercase r for our combinations. All right, and since n is the total number of objects in a set, in this set we have 5. I'm choosing 5 students. And out of those 5 students, I'm putting them in groups of 3. How many different groups of 3 do we want? So what we're going to do in the calculator is we're going to go type 5. Then we're going to put in these keystrokes so that we get in N, C, R, and then hit the number 3, and then enter. And that enter is our equals, basically. So here we go. I'm going to type in 5, math key, probability, enter. Oops. Dang it, I already messed up. Sorry. 5, math key, probability, 3. I'm going to hit the 3 to make sure I choose that particular option. Then I'm going to hit the number 3 because 3 is how many people are going to be in my group. And then enter, and I get the outcome of 10, which means there are 10 different combinations. All right. Now, once we figure out how many combinations there are, now maybe I might want to say, well, I want to know first and second and third place. So I just don't know what the top 3 people. I want to write down how they placed, first, second, or third. In this case, the order would matter. So now, instead of using a combination, we're going to use something called a permutation. And a permutation is when order matters. And another way to put order could be a rank or a title. Because president, vice president, secretary, those are different titles, but they're also different orders that people can be elected for offices. All right, so permutations, the N stands for the same thing, how many total people or objects in a set, and R is how we're grouping them. Now, the difference, when I put the permutation into the calculator, it groups everybody, and then within these groups, it will rearrange them. So to show you by hand what this would look like, I'm going to use the same scenario as above with the 5 different students in a race. Okay, these are my students. And I'm going to take my first group of students. My first group of students were students A, B, and C. All right, and basically A got first, B got second, C got first. But let me rearrange B and C, because maybe C got second and B got third. So that's another order I can put them in. Or maybe A didn't win, but B did. And we go BAC. Or we can flip A and C around and say BCA, first, second, and third. Oh, wait a minute, maybe C came in first, so we go CAB. Or we can flip that around and say CBA. So within the same combination of students, I can organize them 6 different ways for their places. That was just one group of students. Now we would have to choose another group, BCD, and do the same thing with them. Rearrange them all the different ways we can rearrange them for coming in first, second, and third. So here I want you to write down, now choose 3 others and rearrange. So it's a very tedious, long, ongoing process to do this by hand. If we use our calculator, though, we're going to go in, use our math button, again, go over to probability, and then we're going to choose option number 2, which is in capital P, lowercase r. This is your permutation. And so in this situation, we would it would take each one of our groups and rearrange them so that we don't have to. And I'm going to type this into my calculator. 5 for the number of people, NPR for the permutation, and I still want them in groups of 3, first, second, and third. Okay, let's see how many different permutations we can come up with. 5, hit the math key, go to probability, and I want number 2, option number 2, and then still in groups of 3. And we would have 60 variations. If you notice, with this one group of students A, B, and C, I had 6 different variations with just them. So if I have 10 different groups possible for my combinations that we set up here, and each combination can be rearranged 6 different times, it makes sense that we have 10 times 6, which is 60. All right, but you have more people, more places, it takes longer and longer to do. So just remember that combinations and permutations are the same, except in a permutation you rearrange each combination. All right, so it's your combinations with all of those combinations individually rearranged. So you will always have more permutations than you do combinations. Okay, let's take a look back here on the back. And what you're going to do on the first 4 is you're going to determine whether they're a combination or a permutation. Go.